I'm going to hand it over to our presenter, Donna Febo, who is an independent broker and mother to two kiddos with special needs. So Donna, take it away.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everybody, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So, as Lindsay said, I am an independent broker. I have been an independent broker for almost 10 years now. I am the mom of two disabled kids. I work on the end of Eastern Long Island in Region 5, and I currently support about 68 families. I spend some of my time volunteering, doing WebExes like this, and working with OPWDD to train new brokers. So it's really kind of important that we educate our field and we help support those around us. And care management and the folks that they support are one of the most important people, if not the most important people. So tonight I'm going to just give you a very, very brief overview of self-direction. Sometimes when I do these WebExes, I'm not always sure at what point in the process folks are. So we like to start with the basics, and we'll have times for questions at the end. So I'm just going to go over some of the things what self-direction is, how a person can benefit, who can self-direct their services, and the responsibilities of someone who self-directs. What I have on the screen here is OPWDD's mission statement or vision statement. And their goal through self-direction is really to support folks having more meaningful relationships, experience personal health and growth, live in the home of their choice, and fully participate in communities. Next. What is self-direction? Self-direction is the ability to choose who you hire to assist you, the ability to pick and choose services and supports that best fit your life, and the increased flexibility to change your mind as your life changes. It really puts the person in the driver's seat. It's very different from traditional services insofar as you get to determine what supports and services are most important to you and what supports and services you find most meaningful in your life. And you can use your funds, your self-direction funds, to pay for those supports and services. Next slide, please. So I just want to start with a little bit of data. When I created this slide, which was quite a while ago, this was the most updated information that we had from OPWDD. So as of 2021, we had over 22,000 folks self-directing their services in New York State. I left this in here. We now have more updated numbers, but I left this in here just so that you guys could see the growth and how self-direction has really blossomed in the last, 7 or 8 years. Upstate, self-direction started in about 2003, 2004. Downstate, we really became affiliated and really gained knowledge of self-direction in 2014 when it was redesigned. So this gives you an idea of what happened up until 2022. And I like this slide because these are OPWDD's numbers. Next slide, please. What you may or may not know is OPWDD is divided into 5 regions. Region 5, my region out here on Long Island, you can see there in yellow. Then we have Region 4, which is the metropolitan area of Brooklyn, Staten Island. And then Region 3, which is the Capital District, the Conic and Hudson Valley. Region 2, which is Central New York, Broome and Summit, and then Western New York and the Finger Lakes. And just take a mental picture of this map, because as you can see, Region 5 and 4 are 2 of the smallest regions geographically, but as we all know, probably more denser than the other regions. Next slide. I showed you that so I can show you this. This is a breakdown of what the population of folks that are self-directing look like in 2021. And as you can see, one of the smallest regions geographically or area-wise, Region 5 has the most people self-directing, which makes sense because we are densely populated. What always stood out to me about this graphic is that Region 4 which is the metropolitan New York City area, Staten Island, the 5 boroughs, has the smallest number of folks self-directing, as of 2021. One of the things that OPWDD wants to do is change this demographic. They want more people self-directing in more places, especially in the downstate New York City area. If 24% of Region 2 is self-directing, which is fantastic. So this just gives you an idea of how self-direction is broken up across the state. Next slide. So self-direction and ACA. This is just a bunch of numbers to help you get an idea. So as I said, we were using 2021 numbers, and then earlier this week, OPWDD decided to share with us that as of today, there are currently about 31,000 folks who are enrolled in self-direction across New York State. ACA currently has about 5,944 members enrolled in self-direction. There are currently approximately 100 fiscal intermediary agencies serving self-direction. And at last count, which is this is a very loose number because I had to work with the state on this, but self-direction currently has about 1,800 authorized brokers across all 5 regions. Now, it is worth noting that not all brokers are authorized. So you can broker for a loved one or a family member and not draw a salary. You would take the initial broker trainings, but you do not have to be authorized going forward. And you would not build those funds into a self-direction budget. So when I got these numbers from New York State, Jason Cheney up in central office said, it's about 1,800, but keep in mind that we don't authorize brokers, or we suggest that they're not authorized if they're just unpaid supports. Next slide, please. So who can self-direct? So eligibility. Before applying for self-direction, you must be eligible for OPWDD services. If you're currently receiving waiver services, you are eligible. If you have never received waiver services and you're unsure, then you can visit the OPWDD website. Sounds easy, right? Not so much. Next slide. As with everything that we do in New York State, and self-direction is no exception, there are steps and it's a process. So the first step would be to gain eligibility through OPWDD. We call the front door, we take the front door information center, we get our eligibility. The second step would be waiver enrollment. So you have to be enrolled in the HCBS waiver program with Medicaid. Then CCO enrollment, which in this case, ACA is the CCO. So you would be enrolled with them and assigned a care manager. Then, if you decide to self-direct your services, you would need self-direction service authorization. So much like everything else, it is a process. Next slide, please. The benefits of self-directing. Self-direction offers increased flexibility and access to supports and services. So the individual chooses who works with them. In traditional services, you would be assigned a ComHab staff or a respite staff person. Self-direction allows you to choose who works with you. You get to choose what hours you'd like the person to work with you. Is it mornings? Is it evenings? Is it weekends? Maybe you're a late sleeper and you don't want someone to come to your house to work with you before 12 o'clock. You get to choose. You can choose classes you'd like to take to assist you to work on goals and supports. When you work with a ComHab staff, it's a habilitative service. So we want to make sure there's goals and supports that we're working on. You can choose memberships that you align with your goals and supports. Maybe your goal is health and safety and you want a gym membership. So these are things that the self-direction budget can pay for. And you're going to create a plan that allows for social interaction and the ability to live a full life with family and friends. Self-direction is, the tenet is integration and habilitation. So that's really what we're looking to accomplish here. Next slide, please. So your circle of support. Circle of support, or COS, you're going to hear a lot. For your circle of support, the person is always at the center. The person drives all of the decision making. To support that person, we have the care manager. We have the support broker. The care manager, writes the life plan, which is the prescription for services. The support broker is the one that writes the budget and helps to maintain the budget and assist with hiring staff, submitting reimbursements. There's really a lot of things that a support broker can do. The fiscal intermediary, which is the agency that is between the individual and their dollars, they're the ones that bill Medicaid to get the funding for the supports, the classes, the memberships, the ComHab for the person. And of course, any advocates or important people in the person's life that help with the decision making. Next slide, please. Okay. I like to say with great power comes great responsibility. When we talk about self-direction, we need to understand that the self part is the most important part. The person receiving the services is going to be the one making the bulk of the decisions. And sometimes when you're making those decisions, it's a huge responsibility. So when you self-direct your services with budget authority, you have some responsibility for the management of that budget. Your circle of support and your support broker can help with choosing how much responsibility you want to have. So you need to make it clear when you're choosing a fiscal intermediary and you're choosing a support broker that the people who are supporting you are going to provide the level of support that you need. Maybe you're the kind of person that's not great with technology and needs help uploading invoices or reimbursements for payment. You might want to make sure you're clear that's a support that you need. Maybe you're not great at always checking the budget lines online. So you need to know that you have the support you need when choosing a fiscal intermediary and a support broker. Next slide. The responsibilities of the participant, the person self-directing. You need to ensure that WDD eligibility is maintained. You're going to choose a care coordination organization. You're going to attend the front door session and the self-direction orientation, which are offered in recorded videos. You're going to apply for self-direction through your local regional office, which you're going to do with the assistance of your care manager. Once approved, you're going to hire a broker, an FI, and invite people to be in your circle of support. You're going to attend life plan meetings. If you don't already do that, you're absolutely going to do it with self-direction too, to determine the services and supports that will need to be self-directed. And in your life plan meetings, your fiscal intermediary and your support broker will now be attending because they have become part of the circle of support. Next slide, please. People responsible for helping you implement your self-directed budget, like we discussed, the circle of support. People who you invite to assist you with making informed decisions about your life. Your care manager, the person you select from an approved care coordination list to help you access services and supports. In this case, you've chosen ACA. People responsible for helping you implement your self-direction budget, which, as we discussed, is your support broker and your fiscal intermediary. And the regional office, one of those regions, depending on where you live, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, will assign a self-direction liaison. Everyone has a self-direction liaison that is assigned to assist them with problems or issues where you may need to contact New York State. Next slide, please. The roles of each circle member. The care manager assigned by your CCO to complete and maintain the life plan, to assist with identifying services and supports for the person. The care manager writes the life plan. The life plan is the prescription for services. Without a life plan, nothing happens. So it's very important that that life plan is maintained and that you make sure as a participant, you are taking an active role in supporting that care manager by signing the documents they ask you to sign and attending meetings that you're asked to attend. You can have an advocate. Some people do, some people don't. Some people have many advocates. You can have that person would be a support that's chosen by the individual to attend meetings and help manage the self-direction plan. As we mentioned, support broker. The support broker creates and maintains the self-direction budget. The self-direction budget is a living document. It can, once it is fully implemented, it can be changed at any time. We can make huge changes and we can make small changes. We can add money to certain categories or take money away. So it is forever living. And the fiscal intermediary reviews and pays expenses. They maintain the monies paid out to families and received from Medicaid on the behalf of families. They are the employers of record. They monitor staff and they pay salaries. So your fiscal intermediary is going to be your HR department. You have the ability to hire who you want to hire. You have the ability to fire who you want to fire. And so does the fiscal intermediary. They're going to be the ones that do the fingerprinting. They're going to do the clearing. They're going to make sure that the people who are working with and for you are legally able to work with you. They monitor driver's licenses, make sure that everybody's got a clean license because they're going to be driving you or your loved one around. So the fiscal intermediary plays a huge role in maintaining health and safety and making sure that employees are doing the right thing. Next slide, please. The three important documents of self-direction, as we discussed: the life plan, which is the prescription for services. It consists of a narrative, which describes who you are, the goals and supports, your safeguards, waiver services, and your members and providers. I hope everybody has seen a life plan. The staff action plan is going to be the goals and supports that the person wants to work on. The staff action plan is written with the care team, with your circle of support, by your support broker. It will take the goals that are decided upon in the life plan and pretty much give a job description or job responsibilities of staff actions for your ComHab staff. So if one of your goals is to learn how to swim, that is the goal. The staff action would be all of the steps that the staff is going to take to support you to learn how to swim. So staff will help Anna pack a bag to go to the swim school. Staff will assist Anna in changing into her swimsuit. And these staff actions can be as specific or as broad as needed. And lastly, the self-direction budget. Why does the budget come last? Because the budget is the money that supports what you want to accomplish and the goals you want to achieve. The budget should never drive the goals and supports. The goals and supports should drive the budget. It lists all the budget lines and money allocated to each line. Next slide. That's it. So that's your brief overview.
Thanks, Donna. I'm sure we have a ton of questions. So just a reminder to everyone, the chat box is the little text arrow, text bubble in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have questions, feel free to type them in. There's a request for our, okay, so thank you for the reminder, Nikki and Don. I'm going to put in our email address, my team's email address in the chat, so everyone can reach us. But the first question we have is, what is the best way to get an up-to-date list of available brokers and the regions they serve?
So this is kind of a hot topic. So when you're approved for self-direction, the state will send an email that says, congratulations, you're approved for self-direction, and now you can hire a fiscal intermediary and a broker, and they will send you a list of the brokers in your region. I think they're still sending the brokers in your region and you're not getting 1,800 names. I hope that that's what's happening, but I'm not sure. Because it is up to the care manager and the individual to identify a broker, this can be a very daunting task. Everybody is listed alphabetically. So the onus falls on families now to start calling down the list. So we've come up with a little bit of a better way. Currently, I facilitate a broker forum we're almost at 300 members now, independent broker forum, where we're able to provide care managers with a broker interest form where they can complete. It's HIPAA compliant. And, so if someone is seeking a broker, the care manager can complete it and we can post it to our forum. And then interested brokers would call the care manager. We never want to call a family directly. Is this the best way? No, but it is a way. And we're getting a lot of positive feedback that we're helping a lot of families. So you're welcome to do that as a way of finding a broker. The other thing is ask your care manager, because care managers know who the brokers are. They work with them with other cases. So the care manager can help you identify a broker too.
All right. What do you mean by classes? Does education fall into that?
So that's another tricky question. So when we talk about classes, the definition according to OPWDD is open to the public with published fees. So we want to make sure that the classes are integrated. They're in settings where our folks or ourselves are going to interact with other folks who do not have a developmental disability. The state is looking for integration. So anything that's open to the public, not on the grounds of an OPWDD setting, and not matriculated. So when we use the word education, vocational classes are fine. Something that generates a certificate, plumbing would be one, woodworking, but a class that is matriculated, in other words, a college class, would not be eligible.
All right. Respite. I think this question means, can a respite provider live in the same house and be paid as a respite staff?
So there are 3 different kinds of respite in self-direction. There is traditional respite, where a person would go to a site to be provided respite services, whether that was an overnight or a Saturday or an after-school program. That's the first kind. Then there is the self-hire respite line, where the person is paid an hourly wage to work with the individual. Now, if they're not a family member and they live in the same house, this is allowable. But if they are a family member, this is not. The third type of respite is family reimbursed respite, which are monies paid to the caregiver for relief. In this case, the person can have a family member living in the same house provide that type of respite service.
All
it gets a little confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just to give a little bit more clarity for some folks who might not know, respite is meant to be a break to the caregiver, right? So respite is basically finding someone to provide supervision for your loved one with a disability while you take a break or do whatever it is that you need to do. You got a shout out in here. Donna says, good job on your presentation.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So the funding comes from New York State and Medicaid?
Yes, it does. So in the self-direction budget, there are Medicaid funds and there are New York State funds. The New York State, solely New York State funds, or 100% New York State funds, are your other than personal services. And those are your reimbursements for internet, phone, clothing, utilities, those type of things. And that category is capped at $3,000. Family reimbursed respite are 100% state funds, and that's also capped at $3,000. And then housing subsidy money. That is also 100% state funds. And again, the cap would be the amount allowable through the HUD rates, housing and urban development. And housing is a topic onto itself. So I don't know that we really want to get into that right now, but I hope that answers the question.
Yes, definitely. Can unused money in a year's budget be rolled over into the following year?
So here's the good news and here's the bad news. The bad news is the answer to that is no. However, unused money will reset at the end of the budget year. It doesn't disappear. So if you don't use a portion of your budget and your budget is getting ready to reset, the money does not roll over, but you will reset at the same amount for the next year. So it's not a use it or lose it scenario. You don't get to roll it over, but you're not going to lose the funds going into the next year either. The funds or the amount of a self-direction budget is determined by the scores on a developmental disabilities profile, your DDP2. So the level of disability drives the dollar amount of the budget.
Yeah, so I wanted to add to that a little bit to what Donna's talking about with the DDP2. I mentioned this at our last session, and I think it's just important to bring up. The DDP2 is one of the many assessments that your care manager will complete. Like Donna mentioned, the long name of it is Developmental Disabilities Profile 2. So it asks questions about the person's ability to cook and clean and cut scissors with along a straight line, and it really it can ask a lot of questions that are tricky to talk about and difficult to talk about, especially as parents, right? We always want to focus on what our kids can do versus what they can't do. But the purpose of the DDP2 is to make sure that the person that's receiving services has what they need on their worst day. So you really want to make sure that you're answering those questions realistically, right? So if the question is, can Susie roll over from her side to her back or walk up the stairs independently? If Susie can't do that every day independently, then you want to answer that question no. So it's one of the few times your care manager will ask you to focus on what your loved ones can't do, but it's because like Donna is saying, services, particularly in the self-direction budget, are really decided on those scores. So you want to plan for the worst day. Another thing that I wanted to mention, there's a great question in here from Adele. Is there a manual that includes examples of what can be paid for through self-direction? So when we send our follow-up email, Donna, let me know if you have a better idea of a resource for this, but I was thinking that self-direction guidance for providers, it's long, but it's really easy to read and understand. Yes. So we'll send that along with our follow-up email, and it really walks through each section of the budget and what can be covered and the kinds of ins and outs and caveats to what can be covered in what section. So we'll send that along too. On average, how long does it take to become eligible for self-direction, albeit you already have a care manager and a life plan? So those are great first steps. What do you think, Donna? Do you want to give a number?
Well, eligible for self-direction and have a complete self-direction budget up and running. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. Eligible for self-direction, that would mean, and you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong here, Lindsay, that would mean that you have a life plan, you have a care manager, you now need to go through the self-direction orientation, right? And then the care manager has to apply for self-direction with a SART.
Yeah. Yep. So once you're on the waiver, working with the care manager, have a life plan, your care manager can submit what's called a service authorization request tool. I'm sorry, a service amendment request tool.
They just changed it. It's not you.
Or, a different paper, a different document if you're brand new. But basically, your care manager says, hey, this person is interested in pursuing self-direction. Can they be authorized for that service? And sometimes simultaneously, or sometimes before your care manager asks for that, you and your loved one, whoever's going to be part of the circle of support, and the member themselves can and have to attend a self-direction information session where they give you more information. It goes into even more specifics. So once you've done the class and the service has been authorized by the local OPWDD office, then you can start looking for a broker, start identifying who your fiscal intermediary will be, and then you start planning for the budget. So it's really hard to say, unfortunately, how long it can take. Some local DDRO offices move a little more quickly than others. Some folks who are asking for self-direction, it's a little more straightforward that what they need and what they're qualified for. So I would say a couple of months from requesting to actually starting to work on the budget is reasonable.
Right. And from that point, once you've identified a broker and a fiscal intermediary, then all the documents have to be completed to apply for startup. Startup means you want authorization to write the budget, to create the supports and services, to see what the goals are going to be. And that process can take anywhere from 1 to 4 months, depending on the meeting schedule, depending on how quickly the DDRO processes things, how quick your broker can write the plan. A lot of times we're held up by the DDRO, by no fault of their own. Stuff happens. Over the summer, we had to redo all our budgets. That backed everything up 3 months. Right now, Region 5, at least I can speak to, is very, very efficient. So we're getting things done quickly. But it's really hard to say because everybody's life is different and the process is different for everyone. But once you go through the startup process and the budget is written, staff action plan, goals and supports are decided on, everything goes through to the fiscal intermediary. From the fiscal intermediary, it goes up to OPWDD. At that point, it goes to central office. So, it's a hurry up and wait game sometimes because we're not actually sure how quick things are going to get processed.
And I think you said in our last session, Donna, like all of this legwork is a one-time thing, right? So once your budget is approved and up and running, it's approved and up and running. You can make changes, but those happen more quickly than initial approval. So all of the, the extra work and the hurry up and wait is just on the front end and doesn't usually continue on.
Right. And while you're waiting for changes to your budget, you're still using what you have. So there's no break in service.
Good point. Good point. So waiver service versus self-direction. What makes self-direction a better option? So I do just want to clarify really quick that you have to be on the waiver in order to receive self-direction, right? The home and community-based waiver is required to have self-direction because these services, broker and FI, fiscal intermediary that Donna's been talking about, they are waiver services. So I think the question is traditional services versus self-direction. Why is self-direction better?
So maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I never want to say it's the best option because it isn't for everyone. There are folks who would be served better using traditional services because there is a lot of paperwork involved. There's a lot of responsibility involved. There's a lot of communication involved. There's uploading of reimbursements. There's portals. There's approval of time. So there's a lot that goes into self-direction. So it's not going to be the best option for everyone. Why is it a better option? Because in some cases, staffing is very difficult. Traditional services, they will set the rate of pay for staff. Self-direction, you set your own rate of pay. You choose who's going to work with you. You choose the hours you want a staff person to work with you. A lot of the times we do a hybrid where, for instance, my own daughter, she attends a day hab during the day. That is a traditional service. We self-direct her hours when she's not in day hab. So she has the ability to attend classes and go to membership opportunities into the community on weekends and evenings when she's not in day hab. So I don't necessarily think that there's a better or a best. I think it's not one size fits all. And I think that the best way to look at it is what is going to support the person the best. That would be my answer to that. Sorry.
That's a great answer. No, I agree. Can you hire your own broker and fiscal intermediary that's not listed, I'm assuming, on this list, right, that we've read?
Yeah, no, you cannot do that. Your fiscal intermediary has to be approved by OPWDD, and your broker had to have taken the broker trainings and been authorized at one point in time, even if they're not a paid support now. And does their payment come out of your budget? The fiscal intermediary monthly fee does not come out of the budget. The broker fee does come out of the budget, not in startup, but once the full budget is up and running.
All right. Why is it not wise to pursue housing right away after budget is approved?
I don't know that it's not wise.
I wondered, I was like, I'm trying to remember if we said something like that.
I just said housing was a world onto its own and
Yeah.
would probably take another WebEx to explain the process.
Yes. Yeah. So
yeah,
maybe
housing is very involved.
Feel free, Seville, to clarify in the chat. We can come back to that question. Do we pay our hired staff from our budget, like our checking account?
No, you do not. That is the job of the fiscal intermediary. The fiscal intermediary is your HR department. So your staff will get paid in the form of a bi-weekly check. I think nowadays it's all direct deposit with the appropriate amount of taxes taken out. Full-time staff have the opportunity to earn benefits, paid time off, health insurance. So it would be the responsibility of the fiscal intermediary to track and pay your staff hours.
And try to think about your budget like an account that you have with someone else, right? Like your fiscal intermediary oversees the account. It's not ever like a money that goes in your bank account that you oversee and have access to, right? Your self-direction budget, that's specific to you is not really a lump of money. It's not a lump of money that you get. It's a lump of, it's like a bucket that your providers pull out of on your behalf.
And it's an estimate because the fiscal intermediaries don't get the money. The fiscal intermediaries have to pay out first, and then they get reimbursed from Medicaid or the state, depending on the budget line. So there is no lump of money or bucket of money sitting anywhere. It's an estimate of how much that you think you're going to use.
All right, does this webinar count towards the self-direction information session? No, it does not. That has to be completed through your local OPWDD office, and your care manager can help you find when those sessions are scheduled and help you get signed up. Good question, though. Some brokers have too many cases, and some families feel their broker is not helping them. Will OPWDD control the amount of cases the broker can take? What is the best way to proceed when a family wants to change the broker? Donna, maybe this is a good point for you to talk a little bit about like the last session we talked about what to ask your broker, how to interview a broker, what kinds of questions.
So though it is true that there are some brokers that have too many cases, a lot has changed in recent years. Now remember, there's 33,000 people who are self-directing in New York State. There's 1,800 authorized brokers. So if we do the math on that, that is a huge number of people that need a broker. So at the end of the day, yes, there are brokers that took on too many cases, and there are brokers that really aren't great at what they do. My advice would be, as Lindsay said, when you're looking to hire a broker, ask the questions. Where do they live? Do they live near you? Can they support the community you're in and know about all of the classes and the opportunities? You need to make sure that the broker is in line with the things that you need. That if you need them to be in person, or you need them to work certain hours, or maybe Friday's your day off and they don't work on Fridays, that's not going to work. The best way to proceed when a family wants to change the broker, I would say, is to start with the care manager. The care managers, for the most part, work with many different brokers. You can also try calling your regional office because they will have a list of brokers as well. Lindsay, do you guys have any other resources? Care management is the resource, right, for that?
Yes, definitely care managers, the resource. If you look on our website, I mentioned earlier tonight, the community resource tool, you can search support brokerage in the region that you live in, and that will give you a list of agency brokers, right? So brokers who work for provider agencies. We don't have a list of independent brokers, but if Donna is okay with it after this, with our follow-up email, we could send that document that she was talking about earlier with her independent broker forum, the interest form. We could send that, and you and your care manager could complete that together. And it's really pretty simple to change a broker. If you're wanting to move, you just kind of say, hey, I want to work with you as my broker instead of my current, and you can switch. Okay, can you explain again the difference between the FI and the broker?
Okay, so think of the fiscal intermediary or the FI as a building or a place, and think of the broker as an individual person. So the fiscal intermediary is a multifaceted team that's going to support the money being reimbursed. They're your HR department, so they make sure that the folks that are working are cleared, and they maintain all of their trainings, they maintain their driver's licenses, they are doing the right thing by you, they're going to pay their salaries. It's more of a group of people who are responsible for getting that money to where it needs to go. Your broker is the person that sits with you and writes the self-direction budget. They're the ones you call when you say, hey, I've decided I want to take 3 more classes and we're running out of money in classes. Can you move that money around? The broker is the one that navigates that. The broker is the one that assists you with hiring staff, which the FI does as well, but the broker can assist you with hiring staff. So they're really 2 separate and distinct services, but everybody works together as a team.
All right. What is the minimum age for a respite provider? Can it be a sibling?
18, and yes.
As long as they don't live in the home, right?
No. If it's family reimbursed respite, they can live in the home.
Oh, okay. All right. You learn something new every day. So someone's spouse could provide family reimbursed respite.
So that's where it gets tricky. So New York State doesn't ask who's providing the family reimbursed respite, because the money goes to the person, not to the respite provider. However, nobody ever wants to commit Medicaid fraud, so we want to follow the rules. So somebody's spouse could not be the family reimbursed respite provider if they're also a natural support insofar as they're a rep payee or a CDPAP representative. So it's a very, very gray area, that question, and I hesitate to give a yes or a no.
Yeah, that's probably a question to connect with your individual broker and FI about, and see what their stance is. This is a great question. When is the fiscal year for your budget?
So the fiscal year starts on the 1st of the month that the full budget is approved. So let's say we start writing a budget today. We were approved for startup for April 1. It takes us April, May, the end of June. The support broker and the fiscal intermediary submit everything to New York State. So New York State could give us a July 1 approval date. If they do, and there's no delay, if they do, the budget year becomes July 1 to June 30th. So everybody's fiscal year, it's not a calendar year. Everybody's fiscal year is going to be dependent on when the full budget is approved.
All right. Who conducts the DDP2? That's the care manager. Your care manager does your DDP2, and your habilitation providers do a DDP2. So your broker or your FI.
In some cases, the broker does the DDP2 because the care manager or the individual is only on a basic plan. We've run into that too.
Yeah. So do you find, Donna, is this still the case that the self-direction budget is based only on the care management DDP2?
No,
Okay.
no. So what happens with self-direction is we as brokers can choose any DDP2 that was done within the last 2 years. It just can't be older than 2 years. I always pick the most recent one, no matter who did it.
Okay.
Unless there have been instances where a waiver provider, like a SEMP person, a job coach or a SEMP administrator, will do a DDP2. And because they don't see a lot of the things that the care manager sees, as far as maybe some behaviors, or the person's never had a seizure at their program, their numbers are going to be really, really out of whack, because that's a specific moment in time as opposed to the person as a whole. So in that case, I would redo a DDP2. But most of the time, I just use the most recent. We ask that DDP2s are completed as a circle, that the care manager invite the team and we do it together. But yeah, it's DDP2s can be done at, by the broker, the care manager. But yeah, the one that's within the last 2 years is the DDP2 we have to use. I prefer the most recent because that's the best reflection.
Yeah. If my loved one is 16 years old and going to school, eligible for self-direction, does he get any amount for shoes and clothes?
So if your loved one is 16 years old and in school, let's start this way. If your loved one is 16 years old, they would not be eligible for a clothing reimbursement. You have to be 18 for that. Now you can be in school 18 and be eligible for a clothing reimbursement. The school part does not make you ineligible for clothing. I don't know that I answered that.
I think you did. Yep,
Okay.
I think you did. I'm meeting with my care manager and broker for the first time in 2 weeks. My son has been approved for home and community-based waiver services and self-direction with budget authority. Please explain what the respite direct provider purchased of authorized 520 units means, and what questions should I be asking the care manager and broker? So the 520 units tells me that it's a waiver respite service. So Donna talked a little bit about family reimbursed respite, which is kind of like you pay out of your pocket to your neighbor to come hang out with your child, and then you get reimbursed for that money. Whereas waiver respite essentially means there's no like cash exchange. It's all billed directly to Medicaid. So it could be that you go to a local agency. Direct provider purchase, Donna, means that they're getting it from an agency, right? So
right. So we're purchasing the funds from the service from an agency, whether it's respite, day have, supported employment. We're purchasing them. So we're setting aside those funds in the budget.
So your son has been authorized to receive 520 units, which sometimes that's interpreted as 520 hours, and sometimes it's interpreted as 520 quarter hours. So
Yep.
that might be a good question to ask your broker or your care manager. So that means you'll go to an agency in your area that provides waiver respite, and you'll ask them for a staff. You'll say, I'm interested in having a respite staff, and I want to use your staff for that. Or maybe you know somebody that you could have apply to that agency, right? And become your respite provider and work for that agency. And then maybe they work with other families too. So you can kind of, it essentially means you're not self-hiring those staff. You're going to an agency and asking for them to provide you with the staff. Lastly, is there a specific website for Medicaid to obtain the list of benefits that my son is entitled to? So, I think not a specific website. I think definitely ask your care manager, ask all of these questions. No question is a stupid question. If you need something to be explained again in a different way, say that. We know that this is all sometimes like a foreign language and really confusing. So just ask for clarification, and you can always reach out to us too. And we're happy to have like a one-on-one session with you, answer what we can, and then pull your care manager in as well. So feel free to email us. How do we find an information session for self-direction? Ask your care manager. They can help you identify in your region what sessions are coming up and help you get signed up for those. If you change to self-direction and it's not working out, can you go back to traditional services? Absolutely. You can certainly do that. What are some examples for approved IDGS? So individual directed goods and services. Donna, you want to take that one?
So yeah, so IDGS, individual directed goods and services, is a category with different budget lines assigned to it. So those budget lines can include, let me just pull up a budget because I don't want to miss any. Those budget lines can include camp, funding for community classes, coaching for parents, clinical consultants or independent contractors, and those would be ABA providers, speech providers. They're non-direct, they would work to train the staff. Clinical direct providers or therapies, health club or memberships, and then some stuff that we use for people who live on their own, mostly household related goods and services, paid neighbor. We have transportation, transition programs. So IDGS is a very robust category of services or budget lines, and the entire category is capped at $32,000. If you're looking for specific classes, memberships, camps, those are conversations you have when you're in the startup process, because folks on this call, as I understand it, are from many regions, maybe all 5. So I don't want to start listing specifics because we could be here all night.
Okay, so Donna, are you okay to stay for a couple extra minutes? I know it's
Sure.
7:32, but maybe we can stick around and try to get through these questions. Seville, I think I'm gonna recommend that Seville, you connect with our team, shoot us an email. I'll put our email in the chat box. It sounds like there's some questions about housing and there's some urgency to those questions. So if it's okay, we can chat offline and separately from this forum and kind of work on developing a plan. So our email is memberrelations@myacany.org, and I'll put it right in the chat for anyone else that wants to reach out. What is the difference between agency brokers and independent brokers? Advantages or disadvantages of each?
Well, I can tell you the difference, but I can't tell you an advantage or a disadvantage because I'm not an agency broker. So an agency broker is someone who is employed by or works with the agency. So they would work with the fiscal intermediary agency. Most of the time, that's how it works. So everything is considered in-house. The fiscal intermediary agency, they're in the same building, as opposed to an independent broker who works alone, or sometimes we partner with others. Independent brokers have a lot more say in the cases that they take and the folks that they work with. Independent brokers can work with many different fiscal intermediaries, so they have a better perspective on what other fiscal intermediaries do, whereas an agency broker will only work with that one fiscal intermediary. So it's more of an in-house versus a broader scope of understanding of brokerage.
And I will say, from a care management perspective, many of the independent brokers that I worked with when I had a caseload got into independent brokerage because they had a loved one, a child, a family member, a personal connection, right, to this field, and to someone who has an intellectual or developmental disability. And that, I don't know, I always found that to be a really good quality, right? They're, in my experience, very creative thinkers, very strong advocates. So, and there are agency brokers who are creative thinkers and great advocates too. But that tends to be my experience, that people who are independent brokers, like Donna, got into this because they have a very personal connection to it.
And, you know, just a little background, I actually started in this field 30 some odd years ago. My degree is in psychology. I started working with folks with developmental disabilities in some of the first IRAs that were open by AHRC, which is a residential housing program. I was blessed with two disabled folks, and because of my previous knowledge, that's how I ended up where I am. But, you know, a lot of our independent brokers are also care managers, which is so fantastic. Very, you know, I find that to be a huge asset because they can see it from both sides, you know, and that is really fantastic to have that kind of knowledge.
What happens to my services if I travel out of the country for more than 1 month?
Well, depends on where you're going. So you're only allowed to use your self-directed services out of the country if you're going to, let me get this right, Canada, Guam, Puerto Rico, or the US Virgin Islands. Those are the only 4 places that you can use self-directed services out of the country. You need pre-approval. There's forms to be filled out. You have to specifically write which services you're taking with you or you want to use out of the country. Now, if you're just going to go out of the country and you're going to not use any services, in other words, you're going to stop your self-direction and then pick it up when you get back, that is completely allowable.
Can you get approval? Sorry, can you get approved for self-direction if my child is 6 years old with provisional eligibility? So that's a great question. That's a great question. So for those of you who might not know, when kids come to OPWDD and apply as young children under the age of 8, they're given eligibility, they're given what's called provisional eligibility, meaning you're qualified, like you'll have to reapply when the child is 8 or turning 8. And then if you qualify still, you can be given permanent eligibility. And that's because it's really hard to tell how disabilities are going to affect some kids as when they're just little kids, you know. So provisional eligibility doesn't necessarily affect it, you know, in writing, it doesn't affect your ability to apply for the waiver, but I do like to just be transparent and open that we are seeing a trend and a shift in service authorization, where younger kids, age 6, typically like below age 12, 13, are having a hard time getting approval for waiver services, getting approved for the home and community-based waiver. And the DDROs, OPWDD is saying these things are really the responsibility of the family, the natural supports, the school district, so you're not eligible for home and community-based waiver. Now, you can certainly still apply. Your care manager can help you with that. Your care manager and you can sit down, and our team is able to help with this too, and write a really strong justification to submit with writing, you know, requesting waiver services. And if you are denied, you can appeal that denial. So it is a process, but I do just like to be open with folks that we are seeing it's a different world. You know, when I had a caseload, I was a care manager for almost 8 years. and it was doable to get young kiddos, 5, 6, 7 waiver services. We could do it.
Mhm.
And that has really shifted as of recently. So I just like to say that out loud, but we can talk more about that, Jackie, if you want to have a one-on-one conversation. Is it hard to make the self-direction plan if the person has a basic plan for care management? Great question.
So it's not hard or difficult. However, I always recommend not having a basic plan. I believe self-direction works best with a comprehensive plan. I know that all the visits can be, sometimes difficult on a family, a little bit cumbersome. To me, a comprehensive plan is better. I feel like the care management team, the family, the circle of support, everybody's more invested. There's more conversation. And this is honestly my gut feeling, because I feel as if there is more connection. So, for instance, we have a life plan meeting coming up with one of the young kids, that well, young girl, she's now 15, that I support. And the mom said, I haven't heard from my care manager in 6 months. Do you know if she's still my care manager, or 5 months, whatever it was? And I said, no, because I haven't heard from her either, because she's on a basic plan. I don't know if that is what usually happens. And honestly, I don't know if something happened to the care manager, but I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect unless the person is on a comprehensive care management plan.
And
You
I
may
think
disagree, Lindsay. I'm sorry.
no, no. I mean, that's just the nature of those services, right? Like
Yeah.
a basic care manager has 4 contacts with the people they serve. If somebody's enrolled in basic, they see their care manager twice a year for the life plan meetings, and then the care manager can only provide certain services 2 other months out of the year. So it's set up like that, it's a basic service. It's called basic because it's basic. And it really the care manager can only provide support for an unexpected need. So an unexpected issue with Medicaid, an unexpected conflict with a landlord, those kinds of things. Whereas comprehensive is a holistic and robust service, so they can provide support with anything and everything every month out of the year. So this will be the last question. It's 7:42. I think we could probably go on for hours, but like I said, we will follow up with you if we weren't able to get to your question tonight. So Donna, I know you talked a little bit about the countries you can travel to and use your self-directed budget. Can you talk a little bit about traveling between states and what the budget covers as far as travel?
Okay, so traveling between states is slightly easier. You still have, well, first of all, anywhere within New York State, you do not need pre-approval for. If you are traveling to a neighboring state, technically OPWDD is not going to give you their approval. However, the FIs always want to know when you're leaving the state and how long, and especially if it's overnight. And the reason for this is because a lot of them use GPS for the electronic visit verification software. So if you're leaving the state and you didn't tell the FI, or they're not aware, your staff might not be able to clock in and out. So there's a lot that goes into it. So if you are leaving to take your 10-year-old son on vacation, as in this case, you are probably going to get a little pushback on your FI from your FI. Because tickets, taxis, etc., that could all fall under staff activity fees. But if you're traveling as a family, some of the FIs are going to say, well, the travel expenses are split by everybody in that vehicle, or on that, in that hotel room. Or so vacations can get very, very tricky, especially for younger kids. So you'd really have to get into the weeds with that with your broker and your FI.
And that's really only if you're bringing staff along with you, right, Donna? Like if it's just your family traveling, then the budget doesn't cover much of that, right?
Well, if you're not bringing staff along with you, and we're talking about someone who is 10 years old, chances are the only budget line accessible would be personal use transportation. And that would be something that's divided by the people in the car, or, it's very tricky because a 10-year-old is limited. So even though there's staff activity fees, if there's no staff, then there's no activity fees to reimburse, because OPWDD and Medicaid are not going to pay for your vacation, your son's vacation. They're only going to support the staff that go with you. So that is the idea behind that.
I really wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming and your thoughtful questions. And of course, thanks to Donna for knowing every answer ever and being a great presenter and broker.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. And reach out, Lindsay, if you need anything or follow up. Or
Of course, I will. I will. Lots of
thank you, guys.
yous and compliments, Donna. So thank you.
Anytime. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.